Live NFL trivia every Wednesday night on Twitch at 9 p.m. Eastern. Come show off your football knowledge for a chance to win cash prizes. Check the link in the description to find out more. And now, on with our feature presentation. December 31st, 1979. We're down in Atlanta, Georgia, and we're at Atlanta-Fulton County Stadium for the 1979 Peach Bowl between the Clemson Tigers out of the ACC and the Baylor Bears out of the Southwest Conference. This New Year's Eve bowl game was a big one, aside from the fact that it was a nationally televised game on CBS. For one, this game featured two teams ranked inside the top 25, making it the first Peach Bowl ever since the game's inception in 1968 to feature two top 25 teams. The game was also close to a sellout, being by far the highest attended Peach Bowl ever at the time, with over 57,000 fans coming in through the gates, a noticeable increase over the 20,000 fans that showed up to the 1978 Peach Bowl. You had a very good Clemson team, 1 year removed from a 6th place finish and an 11-1 record in the AP poll, who had an absolutely dominant defense, allowing just 9.7 points per game, which was the 4th best total in all of Division 1A, only behind Dartmouth, Texas, and eventual champion Alabama. And you had a surprisingly good Baylor team, who finished 3-8 the year before, hadn't made a bowl since 1974, and had made just one bowl game since 1964. By all accounts, this was going to be a Peach Bowl for the ages. And sure enough, the game, which was the first ever meeting between the two schools, proved out to be a really solid contest, and was a good way for college football to end the decade before going into the 1980s. Because when the final whistle sounded, it was Baylor who came out on top by one possession, winning it by a final score of 24-18. After Clemson jumped out to a 7-0 lead midway through the first quarter, Baylor scored 28 of the next 31 points over the ensuing two quarters, and that was all the momentum that the Bears needed to win their first bowl game since the 1963 Bluebonnet Bowl more than a decade and a half before. Baylor blocked 2 punts and threw 3 touchdown passes, 2 of which came from freshman quarterback Mike Brannon before he got hurt later in the contest. This game was a true statement game for Baylor, as after some bad seasons throughout the 1970s, this game showed that they belonged on the big stage, and would be an indicator of what was to come in 1980, when they won the Southwest Conference by going undefeated in conference play, and were ranked as high as number 6 in the country at one point, going into the Cotton Bowl. But we're not here to talk about what happened on the field. Rather, we're here to talk about what didn't happen on the field. And I'm not talking about the Peach Bowl screwing over a team by not inviting them to the game, like I've made a ton of videos on, most recently with Utah in the 1995 Copper Bowl, which you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. I'm talking about the Peach Bowl screwing over a high school. Because even though this game seemed like a success in terms of the on-field play and the off-field metrics with attendance numbers and 2 high-ranking teams, this game caused a ton of controversy, and maybe the biggest controversy in Peach Bowl history, by what they promised and failed to deliver on. Because let's just say that the biggest loser in this game wasn't Clemson, but rather Warner Robins High School. This is the story behind the controversy and the disaster at the 1979 Peach Bowl, where bowl organizers completely crushed the dreams of tons of high schoolers. Before I talk about the actual controversy in question, we need some context to understand who this high school is, what they were supposed to be doing, and what the original plan was before things went completely up in smoke thanks to some disastrous planning. Our story involves Warner Robins High School, a school located in Warner Robins, Georgia, roughly 2 hours away or just over 100 miles south of Atlanta. And if there's one thing to know about this high school, it's that they had an incredible marching band, which is what you're watching right now. From 1967 to 92, the band received more than 30 superior ratings by the Georgia Music Educators Association. The school has hosted a ton of marching band competitions, and their band is widely regarded as one of the best high school bands in the state of Georgia, with this being especially true back in 1979. And the Peach Bowl, wanting to get the surrounding community involved, had an idea. What if we asked the Warner Robins band to play before the game? I guess there were a few reasons for this. Number one, the Peach Bowl did this before with no trouble whatsoever, as with an earlier iteration of the game, they had Perry High School perform. Number two, considering the fact that the bowl game drew just over 20,000 people to the stadium the year before, maybe it wasn't the worst idea to try and drum up some interest by getting the community involved. Pun completely intended. And number three, it would be great publicity for the game. Playing in front of just under 60,000 people at a major bowl game taking place at an NFL stadium, every high schooler is going to remember that experience for the rest of their lives. Safe to say, the members of this band remember this experience forever, but not for the reasons that they were hoping for. But we'll get into that later. How the original plan for Warner Robins was supposed to go was like this. First off, the band had to fundraise to be able to attend the game. The Peach Bowl was a charitable event back then, so no one was getting paid for their services. The bowl game wasn't going to give Warner Robins everything they needed to be able to attend the game. The band was going to have to do that on their own. This meant that Warner Robins had to raise somewhere in the ballpark of $2,000, no small feat back then, for equipment, a meal, and chartered buses. However, if they did that, which they did by running concessions at high school football games and holding various fundraiser events throughout the year, such as special candy sales, then they would be able to perform a 9-minute set roughly 30 minutes before kickoff of the Peach Bowl. Understandably, Warner Robins jumped at this opportunity. To play in front of a crowd this big in one of the marquee bowl games of the year? Yeah, they were so in. And the band worked their absolute butts off for this performance. Remember, this was taking place during their winter break, and to ask 180 high schoolers to do something school-related over Christmas break of all things is asking a lot. But they didn't care. This was the Peach Bowl. This was the performance of their life. Upon getting the invite in October, they practiced a ton to get ready, even practicing over break in freezing cold conditions, because outdoors in Georgia during the winter isn't exactly pleasant weather to be in. And finally, on December 31st, they drove down in their 4 chartered buses to the stadium, were on the field at 2 o'clock, and were getting ready to go on and take the field. All those weeks and months of rehearsal were coming down to this moment. What happened next, however, broke their hearts. The plan for this game was simple. Baylor and Clemson would be on the field practicing and stretching and loosening up until 2 o'clock, at which point they would leave the field, and pregame festivities would begin, concluding in time for the start of the game at 2:30. However, when 2 o'clock rolled around, guess who was still on the field? That's right, both Baylor and Clemson. Turns out, somehow, not a single person working with the Peach Bowl gave the Baylor and Clemson coaches the schedule of events, so neither Baylor nor Clemson knew that they were supposed to be off the field by 2 o'clock. Seems like a pretty big oversight. So okay, get Baylor and Clemson off the field and let the band perform, right? Well, not quite. Because it wasn't that simple. You had players who weren't fully warmed up yet. You had coaches who likely hadn't run simulated plays yet, and you were going to mess up entire routines if you halted the warm-up before it was over. And at the end of the day, before anything else, first and foremost, this is a football game. Both Baylor's head coach, Grant Teff, and Clemson's head coach, Danny Ford, said that they weren't leaving the field. If they couldn't get their guys fully warmed up, then they weren't going to play in this game. It was too much of a safety risk otherwise, which makes complete sense. Neither Baylor nor Clemson was going to leave the field before 2:15. And for the record, Warner Robins did not blame Baylor or Clemson for this decision whatsoever. When 2:15 came, Baylor and Clemson left the field to go back to their locker rooms. However, you can't push the game back 15 minutes. This is a nationally televised game on CBS. There are tight deadlines to hit, and pushing back the start time was not feasible. So something was going to have to be cut. And unfortunately, it was the performance by the Warner Robins Band. As Dr. Ellis Mills, the director of bands for the Peach Bowl, said on everything, I felt the only decision that could be made was to cancel the activities planned prior to 2:15, including the Warner Robins High School Band. There was absolutely no way to extend or rearrange pregame activities at that point. Just like that, they were on the field, not knowing what the heck was going on, only to be informed that their pregame performance was canceled. They'd still be able to perform at some point during the day, but we'll get to that in a bit. Because as much as this entire thing sucked, they still got to go to a football game. Time for the band to take their seats. That is, if they had seats. See these chairs on the field? Yeah, these were their seats. Their seats were entirely obstructed by the Clemson sideline. And if that wasn't bad enough, the Peach Bowl organizers didn't realize how many people were in the band, so they didn't even lay out enough seats for all the band members. This meant that some unlucky people had to either stand the entire time on a muddy field or sit down in the mud. These are actual shots from the game, where you can see where the Warner Robins band, the only high school band of the game, was sitting, if they were one of the band members lucky enough to even get a seat. So that raises the question, did the band get to perform at the game? Well, the good news was that they got to perform. The bad news was that how the Peach Bowl did this was in the worst possible way. After the game, you had the post-game trophy ceremony and all the usual festivities, including the announcement of the MVP. Then, you had a raffle that was going to be announced, which was for a 1980 Cadillac and a television set. Not a bad haul. And sandwiched in between the two, you had the Dixie Demon Band performing. Think about what this meant from a fan perspective. Who was left in the venue? You either A, left the venue after the game or the MVP ceremony, or B, stayed in the venue because you entered the raffle and wanted to know if you won or not so you could claim your prize. This meant that the stadium was pretty much empty by this point, but of those people left, literally not a single person was here for Warner Robins. All Warner Robins was to any fan left on this cold day at Atlanta-Fulton County Stadium was a waste of time. And 10 more minutes where they had to withstand the cold, and 10 more minutes where they wanted to know if they won the raffle. And remember, this is New Year's Eve. Time is of the essence. It was about 6:30 by this point, so people wanted to get home as soon as possible so they could get ready for whatever festivities were happening to ring in the new year and the end of the decade. So you can imagine how the reception was for Warner Robins when they were brought out onto the field. Lots and lots of booing, none of which had anything to do with the performance of the band. After this day from hell, where they were thrown out of the pregame show to be put in a postgame show that was never going to receive a warm welcome under any circumstances, and where they didn't even have actual seats to watch the game for 3.5 hours, it's not hard to see why the band members were extremely angry, disappointed, frustrated, upset, and every other emotion you can think of. They spent their holiday break getting ready for this, and everyone was lashing out at the Peach Bowl for this, and rightfully so. Band director E.C. Warnock said, "My kids were in a state of shock. It just kind of destroyed them. I know it did me. It was real embarrassing. We must have stood there for about 20 minutes on the sidelines, and I guess we looked funny when we just wandered down to the end of the field without doing anything." Diane Stewart, a drum major, said on all this, "Everyone was just shocked after all we had gone through. A lot of the members were really mad, but mostly, no one knew what was going on." Herman Peavy, the president of the band Booster Club, said, "I saw high school kids, juniors and seniors, crying because they were so disappointed." Charlie Smithers, the president of an organization, Warner Robins, protested the Peach Bowl, saying, "The band's 180 members put in countless hours of practice. Christmas vacation plans were altered. But this event, which was to be the high point of an outstanding season, turned into an afternoon of embarrassment and humiliation by the sudden cancellation of their performance at the scheduled time. This was further compounded by the horrendous seating accommodations provided to the band members, much of which was in mud up to their shoe tops. We feel this is a poor way to treat a band invited as a featured band." And Tom Daniel, the attorney for the Houston County Board of Education, wrote a scathing letter, saying, "Your company failed to live up to the agreement it had, and that a serious grievance had been committed." The Peach Bowl tried to apologize, but the school wasn't accepting their apology. From this point, the story gets a bit murky, as even though the school advocated for a refund, it is unclear whether they got refunded, or whether any litigation took place beyond that. I even went on to Westlaw, which is the first time I've ever willingly went on to Westlaw in my life, and couldn't find anything regarding any litigation that came from this. But whatever happened, it doesn't take away from the absolutely terrible experience that these kids had. To say that the Peach Bowl dropped the ball here would be a massive understatement. There was absolutely god-awful communication on the part of the organizers, and the bowl game, through its treatment of the band before the game and during the game with the seating arrangement, treated them like they were an afterthought, and as though they shouldn't have even been there in the first place. The 1979 Peach Bowl might be remembered for a ton of on-the-field reasons, especially if you're a Baylor fan. But more than 40 years later, its lasting legacy should be as one of the most poorly organized bowl games of all time, that screwed over 180 high schoolers who never had, and maybe never did, have an opportunity like that in their life again. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jg9shop.com, and be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, and subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot. And be sure to check out Twitch every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL Trivia and win cash prizes. Link in the description below. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. So you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.